Brazil has had no official health minister for the past 2 months in the midst of the worst pandemic to hit the country in a century. According to recent polls in the United States, Joe Biden is increasing his lead over President Donald Trump, whose mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis is costing him support. Senegalese authorities announced the resumption of international flights on Wednesday while conducting strict health protocols to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. As the number of coronavirus cases in Brazil continues to rise, having already surpassed 2 million, the country has had no official health minister for the past 2 months, and criticism is growing over President Jair Bolsonaro's mishandling of the health crisis. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us more details.
As Brazil passes the 2 million mark in official numbers of COVID-19 infections with no sign whatsoever of the curve beginning to flatten, Supreme Court Minister Gilmar Mendes accused the Brazilian military of committing genocide. Now, the reason he said this is because far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has replaced all of the doctors in the leadership of the National Health Ministry with military officers that don't have any public health experience, that are not trained medical professionals. For the last 2 months, Brazil hasn't even had an official minister of health. It has an interim minister who's General Eduardo Pazuello, a guy who has no experience, is not a doctor. The reason Bolsonaro stopped putting doctors in charge of the health ministry is because nobody wanted to support him on his push to use hydrochloroquine in the public health system. All of the doctors, all of the public health specialists in Brazil, everyone who's working fighting this crisis on the front lines says there's much better medicines to use. But Bolsonaro has this kind of bullheaded insistence, following the leadership of his idol Donald Trump, of insisting that there's this magic cure for COVID-19 called hydrochloroquine, that all people have to do is go back to work, open the economy as normal, and if they get sick, take this magic pill. The problem is that with over 1.2 million doses of hydrochloroquine produced by the Brazilian military in response to this crisis, nobody's getting cured. There's still 1,000 people dying a day. In the last 24 hours, 1,340 people died from COVID-19. Not having a health minister in office during the worst pandemic in the last 100 years to hit the country, and having 14 military officers in the leadership of the health ministry, none of which are doctors, is tantamount, in the words of Supreme Court Minister Gilmar Mendes, to genocide.
Thank you, Brian. And this Wednesday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro reported on food production and distribution in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the president, during the first half of 2020, animal production has increased by 25%, and the distribution of proteins and vegetables in the country has also increased. Maduro referred to the Mission Agro-Venezuela program, noting that it offers well-defined and strategic guidance for increasing national agricultural production. In Chile, the Chamber of Deputies has approved a bill that would allow citizens to withdraw 10% of their pension funds. With 95 votes in favour, 36 against and 22 abstentions, the bill on early pension withdrawals received the approval of deputies. According to the legislation, members will be able to withdraw up to 4.4 million pesos from their pension funds. The bill will now go to the Senate, where it will also be debated for its final approval. This measure seeks to offer relief faced with the current economic crisis aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. For Chileans, it also represents a first step to eliminating pension fund administrators and reforming the country's private pension scheme. And thousands of people defied the curfew on Tuesday and held a national pot-banging protest to demand the approval of the bill on early pension fund withdrawals. Demonstrators in various cities in the country took to the streets to demand the approval of the bill to allow citizens access to their savings in order to face the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters also rejected the attempt by the Sebastián Piñera government to stop the bill by implementing an aid package that would benefit the middle class and poses multiple requirements while leaving out 70% of the population.
Acá está costando llenar la olla. It is getting harder here to put food on the table. Soup kitchens are being opened in many places of our city. There are more than 15 soup kitchens working. People do not have enough money to pay basic commodities, and what the government does is getting more debts and giving 100,000 pesos bonds. In Chile, no one is able to live with 200,000 or 300,000 pesos. We have no way of working right now. Most men work in construction. Working women have lost their job, and the government has only defended companies. Today they come out and offer 500,000 pesos, but it never reaches the people. We now demand the return of the pension funds because it's our money. It's not a gift from the government. That money belongs to us, workers.
In Colombia, former guerrillas from the FARC-EP have been forced to leave the reincorporation zone in St. Lucia, Ituango municipality in the face of multiple violent incidents. During the early hours of Wednesday morning, 93 former combatants who signed the peace agreement together with their families began their relocation to the municipality of Mutata. They claim that the forced and massive displacement is a result of state abandonment and a lack of security guarantees. The group has denounced the murder of 11 people who signed the agreement and one of their children. In view of this situation, they demand dignified treatment and that the government of Ivan Duque respects the implementation of the peace agreement. And in this context, Rodrigo Granda, in charge of the Commission for Monitoring, Promoting and Verifying the Implementation of the final peace agreement, denounced the continuous threats and assassinations of former guerrillas.
We continue to denounce the murders of those who signed the peace agreement. 217 former FARC guerrillas murdered, and also from the People's Movement, from human rights defenders. Now the extreme right seems to be adopting a new tactic, threatening personalities. There is talk of threats to the Archbishop of Cali and the governor of La Magdalena by Hernan Firaldo's paramilitary forces.
This Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo claimed he had new evidence about alleged human rights violations in Venezuela.
Regarding Venezuela, the UN has found yet more harrowing evidence of gross human rights violations by the illegitimate Maduro regime, citing more than 1,300 extrajudicial executions for political reasons in 2020 alone. International pressure on Maduro must continue until the Venezuelan people can reclaim their democracy.
And in response to the recent statements of the U.S. Secretary of State, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza stressed the false nature of the accusations on Twitter. In a tweet, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister affirmed that Pompeo's advisers give him fake and manipulated information on United Nations reports. He also noted that his advisers failed to alert him of the demands contained within those same reports for the immediate lifting of his government's illegal, unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. And we're taking a very short break now, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. According to recent polls in the United States, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is increasing his lead over President Donald Trump, including in swing states. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Jorge Gestoso, has the details.
Thank you. Joe Biden is increasing his lead over Donald Trump, according to a new Quinnipiac University poll. We're talking 15 points of difference, 52 to 37 at the national level. And we're talking that there's another poll from Monmouth University regarding the state of Pennsylvania. And there, the difference is 13 points, 53 to 40%. And this is a state, a swing state, a state that Donald Trump won in the past election that is considered a key state. That is going on, meaning that most definitely the pandemic, the handling of the pandemic for Donald Trump is costing him very, very big points regarding his possibilities to be reelected. Remember that 67% of Americans disapprove the way that he's handling the pandemic, a pandemic that has no control under the government of Donald Trump. Latest figures, we're talking 75,000 new cases in the last 24 hours. That's a new record. 22 states showing increases of cases, 11 states showing that is the record hospitalizations in the last 24 hours, 224,000 people dead by November the 1st, according to the projection of the University of Washington, and that is definitely making Donald Trump being absolutely at the defensive regarding his political future. We get back to you now.
Thank you, Jorge. The COVID-19 death toll worldwide has now surpassed 583,000, with over 13.5 million cases confirmed. According to the World Health Organization, half of the cases have been reported in the Americas, home to more than 7.1 million cases. Europe, the second most affected region, has reported over 2.6 million cases, followed by the Middle East with 1.3 million. The surge in COVID-19 cases continues in the Americas, as well as in South Asia and Africa. Irish authorities decided on Wednesday to postpone the transition to phase 4 of the country's reopening following an alarming increase in COVID-19 cases.
That the current public health measures should remain in place until the 10th of August. We have agreed that the country will now not be progressing to phase 4 of the revised roadmap for reopening society and business. The priority now must be to get that R number back below 1. By doing so, we will give ourselves the best chance possible to fully reopen our schools in late August.
As the Taoiseach has said, we're pausing proceeding with phase 4, we're postponing the reopening of the pubs, we're widening the mandatory use of face coverings, we're limiting the number of visitors we can have in our homes. We're staying at the current numbers for outdoor and indoor events.
Tensions briefly escalated in Sofia, Bulgaria, after a group of young men attempted to break into the parliament building but were stopped by police. Protesters threw bottles and flammable liquids at police, and at least 2 officers were injured. Meanwhile, thousands of mostly young Bulgarians took to the streets for the 7th day in a row to protest against the government and the country's top prosecutor, accusing them of corruption and links to criminal groups. French President Emmanuel Macron met Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Paris on Wednesday to discuss European Union coronavirus recovery measures. France and Germany had proposed creating a one-off €500 billion recovery fund that would be paid for through shared EU borrowing. That proposal was then expanded by the EU Commission, which put forward plans for a €750 billion fund made up mostly of grants. However, the proposal has faced resistance from Austria, Denmark, the Netherlands and Sweden, who are reluctant to grant the funds without further conditions. This Wednesday, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry stressed that China strongly opposes the United Kingdom's ban on Huawei.
Does the United Kingdom want to keep its independent position, or does it willingly seek to become dependent on America and become America's dupe? The United Kingdom, with no concrete evidence, under the pretext of risks which don't exist at all, has cooperated with the United States to discriminate against, oppress and exclude Chinese enterprises, blatantly violating principles of the market economy and free trade, breaching promises that the United Kingdom has already made and making a wrong decision, severely damaging Chinese companies' interests and seriously impacting the basis of mutual trust for China-UK cooperation. China strongly opposes this. The United Kingdom's choice to ban Huawei will harm the United Kingdom's own interests. The world is big, the United Kingdom is relatively small. I think no matter what, this ban will not prevent Huawei's development and growth.
President of the United States Donald Trump signed new legislation this Wednesday applying sanctions against the People's Republic of China for allegedly oppressing freedom of speech under the national security law in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
Today I signed legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for its oppressive actions against the people of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Autonomy Act, which I signed this afternoon, passed unanimously through Congress. This law gives my administration powerful new tools to hold responsible the individuals and the entities involved in extinguishing Hong Kong's freedom.
And the US president also said that he had signed an executive order to end US trade preferences for Hong Kong, stating that Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China.
Today, I also signed an executive order ending U.S. preferential treatment for Hong Kong. Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies. In addition to that, as you know, we're placing massive tariffs and have placed very large tariffs on China. First time that's ever happened to China.
And in response to US moves, this Wednesday, China announced that it will sanction US entities involved in the bill against the Hong Kong national security law. In response to the recently approved Hong Kong Autonomy Act, signed by President Donald Trump, the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a statement denouncing that the legislation goes against international law. The Foreign Ministry stressed that it represents crude interference in the internal affairs of China. For this reason, China will impose sanctions on US citizens and organizations involved with the Hong Kong Autonomy Act. Over 41,000 people, including soldiers and firefighters, are working in rescue and recovery efforts following floods in East China's Shaanxi province. Since Monday, the extensive floods have affected more than 5 million people in the province. A contingent of soldiers rushed to repair an embankment in Pongyang County on Tuesday. The continued heavy rainfall has caused extensive damages, with many river embankments collapsing, while industrial parks as well as residential communities across several regions of China have been heavily impacted. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. While conducting strict health protocols to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus.
It's the first day, so it's a timid recovery. Today, we have 7 passenger flights and 8 cargo flights. We have set up equipment and a system to welcome passengers and make sure they are treated in coronavirus conditions. It's a timid recovery. The planes will certainly fill up in the coming days. There will be more and more of them, and we think that in the next 2 months, we will have 30% of our traffic compared to last year.
Today, to come to Senegal, we demand strict compliance with border measures, namely the wearing of masks. Everybody wears a mask. You have the physical distance, even at the seats you will rest. You have hydroalcoholic gels everywhere, even at the ATMs. When the passengers arrive, you have thermal cameras, you have the thermal flash. We are in a box where you have to feedback of the temperature, which allows us to insulate them. We have also asked by mutual agreement with the civil aviation that to arrive in Senegal, to have a PCR test that is negative through laboratories that have been cleared.
Ethiopia started filling its Grand Renaissance Dam on Wednesday. The decision was addressed by the Ethiopian Water Minister, Saleshi Bekele, a day after talks with Sudan and Egypt over the giant hydroelectric project became deadlocked. The failure of talks on Monday sank hopes that the three countries could resolve their differences and sign an agreement on the dam's operation before Ethiopia began filling it. Addis Ababa had previously pledged to start storing water in the dam's reservoir at the start of the wet season in July, when rains flood the Blue Nile. South Africa's COVID-19 cases are set to reach 300,000 this Wednesday, the highest figure in Africa and among the top 10 in the world. Africa's most industrialized nation has over 298,000 cases according to the last count, despite a swiftly imposed lockdown aimed at preventing infections spiraling as they did in Europe and the Americas. Positive tests have now increased at a rate of more than 10,000 a day. The African country registers the world's fourth largest daily increase in coronavirus cases in a country of 58 million people. President Cyril Ramaphosa reimposed a ban on alcohol sales and a nightly curfew on Sunday. The signing of a partial peace deal between the Sudanese government and an alliance of armed groups has been delayed, the mediation committee announced on Tuesday. The partial agreement was the result of negotiations between the Sudanese authorities in Khartoum and the armed alliance, which includes the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, the Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement. However, the agreement excludes some of the influential armed groups in the country. The deal was due to bring an end to the dispute between the Sudanese government and groups in Darfur and South Kordofan, among other areas of the country.
According to a deal signed between the government and then Southern Sudan in 2005,
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has stressed that his country has never been isolated, despite the efforts of the United States. During a cabinet session on Wednesday, President Rouhani also noted that progress in the country's development will not stop. The statements came on the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or Iran nuclear deal. The Iranian president highlighted that the issues and failures of the JCPOA were the responsibility of the United States, which withdrew from the deal in 2018, while noting the peaceful and law-abiding framework of Iranian policy. An Iranian Health Ministry spokesperson, Sima Sadat Lari, reported over 2,300 new COVID-19 cases, taking the total number to over 264,000. She also noted that over 227,000 patients have recovered from the virus. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 death toll rose by almost 200 and now stands at more than 13,000. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.